The Motor Dream podcast is recorded on Camaragal land of the Eora Nation. It always was and always will be the lands of the First Nations of Australia.
This is the Motor Dream podcast.
Welcome to episode 42 of the Motor Dream podcast, the final episode of season 2 of the show where we can dream just a little about what our dream garage would be if money was no issue whatsoever. Connor McNally with you, and it's great to have your company at this most festive time of year, that is Christmas. You know, this show has featured so many fascinating guests over the past 2 seasons. It has catered to all different facets of the motoring and motorsport industries across 2 and 4 wheels, as well as personalities from all walks of life. It's something that I have a tremendous amount of respect for every time I talk to my guests about their love for all things motoring and their dream garages. So when I got a message out of the blue recently about the opportunity to interview someone highly respected within the Australian motorsport industry, it was an opportunity that I couldn't knock back. But before we dive into the episode proper, here's the premise of what this podcast is all about for the final time in this second series. I tell my guests that one day they wake up to discover that they've received a text telling them that they need to check their bank balance. They then open up their bank app and they suddenly discover they're instant billionaires. As soon as they discover their newfound fortune, they get an email from this mystery benefactor that tells them that they can spend anything that they like and they can buy any car, bike or machine that they want. There is a catch though. They are only allowed 3 cars, bikes or machines in their dream garage. Sounds easy, doesn't it? But trust me, as my previous guests throughout both series have discovered, it is very difficult to decide what they would like to have in their dream garage. As always, be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast itself wherever you listen to your podcast, and be sure to check out the entire episode library throughout the festive season if you've not yet done so. Also, be sure to follow us on all of our socials, which we'll tell you more about at the end of the show. Now, as I mentioned in my introduction, it's not every day that you get a message to say, would you like to interview one of Australian motor racing's most respected personalities? Initially, I thought it may have been a practical joke played upon me. Fortunately, in this case, it was no joke. When I was told that it was Tim Schenken, it was an opportunity too good not to knock back. Thanks to my contact, I was put in touch with Tim, and fortunately for me, he very kindly agreed to come onto the podcast. Initially growing up in Gordon on Sydney's Upper North Shore in his childhood years before settling in Melbourne in his teens, Tim has been a mainstay of the sport since the 1960s, starting out his career as a racing driver and winning the 1964 Australian Hillclimb Championship. Moving to England soon after, wins in the British Formula Ford and Formula 3 championships, as well as the French Formula 3 championship, helped propel him to the top echelons of the sport in Formula 1. Though his career was brief, he is one of 6 Australian drivers to have stood on a Formula 1 podium. He achieved this feat at the 1971 Austrian Grand Prix when he drove for Brabham. But it was sports car racing that delivered some of his finest career results, winning the 1,000-kilometre endurance races in Buenos Aires and the Nürburgring as a factory driver for Ferrari with the late Ronnie Peterson. Though success at Le Mans would elude him, he would come very close to winning the European GT Championship in 1975 and 1976. During the 1974 season, he divested his racing experience into car construction and formed Tiga Race Cars with New Zealander Howard Ganley, eventually becoming a full-time occupation upon his retirement as a driver in 1977. During its 15-year tenure as a constructor, Tiga would build a number of different vehicles across open-wheeler and sports car categories, achieving success at Le Mans, Daytona, the IMSA Championship in the United States, and the FIA World Endurance Championship. In Australia, Tiga achieved success in the Australian Drivers' Championship, delivering back-to-back CAMS Gold Star titles for Alfie Costanzo in 1982 and 1983, who then drove for Alan Hamilton and Porsche Cars Australia. In 1985, Schenken decided to wind back his involvement with Tiga and return to Australia with his young family, joining CAMS, known nowadays as Motorsport Australia, as its Director of Race Operations. This evolved into becoming the Clerk of Course for the Formula One Australian Grand Prix, a role that he held until 2024, as well as race director for the Australian Touring Car Championship, now known as the Supercars Championship, from 1987 until stepping down in 2021. Schenken remains active within Motorsport Australia and the FIA as a platinum level track inspector. In fact, when I conducted my interview with him recently, he had not long returned from Macau, where he oversaw the inspection of the Guia circuit for the Macau Grand Prix. So he remains in high demand, such is his respect amongst the motorsport fraternity. Above all else, he remains as passionate about motorsport and cars to this day. And when I pressed him about his dream garage, I was pleasantly surprised about the choices that he made and the reasons behind his choices. You'll have to stick around until the end of the interview to find out what they are. So without further ado, it's an honour and a pleasure to welcome Tim Schenken to the Motor Dream podcast. Tim Schenken, it is an honour and a pleasure to have you on the Motor Dream podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely my pleasure. There's nothing more I like than talking about myself.
I'm pretty sure. But and also talking about cars as well, because you have been involved in motorsport for a very long time and your record speaks for itself. 36 Grand Prix, 7 championship points across 4 seasons and 1 podium in your Formula One career. Drove for Ferrari in sports car racing, race director for the Australian Touring Car Championship and Supercars Championship, Clerk of Course for the Bathurst 1000 and the Australian Grand Prix. There's so much in your resume that I'm absolutely impressed with, and you've been very fortunate to have been a part of that industry for so long. How do you sum up your career?
Well, when you think about it, I first saw my first racing car, I guess I was 12 or 13. I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the sport. And to be able to work in the sport on both sides, so to speak, as a competitor, as an administrator, and still be involved, it's that's special. You know, I don't ever wake up in the morning thinking, oh my God, well, you know, what have I have to go to work today or do this or do that. So I've been very lucky in that regard. And you see a lot of sportsmen, especially nowadays, because it's such a young man's sport, whether you're driving, playing tennis, golf, whatever, maybe not so much golf, your career is very early in your life and you have an incredible high over maybe 10 years and then suddenly it all stops. So I've been very lucky in that regard to be able to continue in different sorts of roles and loved every moment of it. You
started your career during the 1950s and 1960s, and you said in what your answer just before, you fell in love with racing when you were 13 years of age. Do you remember specifically when you were at that age, the car that you saw or the race meeting that you saw, and just what instantly grabbed you at that time in your life?
Well, I certainly remember it because I was a Sydney boy, and my father had been transferred to the head office of the company he was working for in Melbourne. So we moved to Melbourne, bought a house. My parents bought a house in Canterbury, and I went to Campbell Grammar Boys School. And one of my classmates there, his father raced hillclimb cars. He didn't live far from where I was, where home was. So I went to his place one afternoon, and that little hillclimb car was there with the motorcycle engine. And something a light bulb went on. I don't know, something clicked. And I thought, my God, this is for me. And from that moment onwards, that's really all I wanted to do was race cars, become a professional race driver.
Was it easy to get into motorsport compared to now? I know there's so many categories of motorsport that everyone finds a way to get into. But was it easier to get into motorsport compared to what we have today with the plethora of categories that are available?
Yes and no. I mean, I think it's the same today, whether you're Oscar Piastri, as it was in my day, and Alan Jones, Jack Brabham. The big difference today is there's so much more publicity and media coverage of motorsport. There was nothing like that in my day. So I started, actually the first car I raced was my mother's Simca Ronde. I'm not sure many of your viewers will be old enough to remember Simca Ronde, so they'll be all on Google now looking to see what sort of car that was.
Yeah, I've seen photos of them. They're a very crude machine compared to today's standards, that's for sure.
Well, they are. I mean, most cars are. And if you go back to the 60s and look at what we drove on the road then. And so I was hill climbing. I had an Austin A30 doing local races, and progressed to a Lotus 18. It was a Formula Junior car, which was the sort of precursor to Formula 3. But I always could see that my future was, if I was going to have a future as a professional racing driver, I had to go to Europe, and I was buying Autosport and Motoring News and all the local magazines from a bookseller or newsagent in the city of Melbourne. So I sort of knew about the racing scene in Europe. So the first opportunity, I took a cabin on a boat out of Port Melbourne to Southampton. That was 1966 or 65, actually.
Well, prior to that, you won the Australian Hillclimb Championship in 1964, which I guess really paved your way to go to Europe. Do you remember quite fondly winning that championship way back in 64?
Yes. I mean, it was just it wasn't a championship; it was a single race. I mean, the greatest thing was with that event, I beat Colin Bond, and Colin Bond in those days was already a bit of a hero. And he had a Lynx with a supercharged Peugeot engine. It had racing tyres on it. I was sort of in an overgrown go-kart, no suspension, JAP Speedway engine in the back. The tyres were wheelbarrow tyres, maximum speed 5 miles an hour on the sidewall, but it was very nimble, good power to weight ratio, and I won that. Colin always says Enzo Ferrari must have seen that, and that's why he employed me many years later.
I'm pretty sure he did. Do you like to constantly remind Colin that you got one up on him?
Of course. No, but also I was racing. I was racing at Lotus 18, and I won a local Victorian championship. Then I think it was called Australian Formula 2. And actually, Lex Davison had already spoken to me about joining Écurie Australie. But sadly, yes, he lost his life at Sandown. Lex was looking at going to retire. Rocky Trezise was going to move up into his Cooper or Brabham. I've forgotten now which car he was racing at the time. And I was going to move into 1500 cc mono Elfin, which Rocky had been racing, but that all sort of came to a tragic end. So I might have had a completely different life had that not happened. But it was really then that steered me, of course, on to going to Europe.
It's interesting to hear you talk that everyone, if you want to make it in the world in terms of motor racing, you have to go to Europe or you have to go to the United States, and nothing's really changed in the 60 plus years, since you went to Europe. And I guess the battles to try and make it in that European scene or the American scene are probably just as tough as it was back then for you as it is today for a number of the modern day contemporaries.
Yes, although I mean today doing this the Supercars series, of course that's a professional series, professional race drivers running in that championship. So that is quite a change from the touring car racing in the 60s. In fact, in my time, the Tasman series was a big thing in Australia. And that was just coming sort of to an end, and touring cars had caught the imagination of the public. So that was the sort of changeover point.
Does that make you a bit sad when you look back that open wheeler racing in this country started to peter away with the demise of the Tasman series, and touring cars became the thing that everyone could really associate themselves with? It's an everyday car, and you can actually race it, and it became accessible.
Well, I'm not sure it's an everyday car you can race.
Well,
They do modify them. So
well, of course, but I mean, when we look back at like the Bathurst 500, when it was a production car race, I mean, yes, it was. You could turn up and drive, I guess you could say, but yeah, I mean, everyone knew ways to flout the rules and everything as they did back in the day.
yes, but that's the way of the world, isn't it? Because if you go to England, it's the British Touring Car Championship. I mean, that's the major national category there. You go to Germany, it's the DTM, mind you, they're GT3 cars now, but it's just the way the public watch motor racing, or what attracted them. But of course, when you get to Formula One, that's something else. That's from outer space.
I'm impressed with your CV prior to you going into Formula One. In the late 60s, 68 and 69, you won the British Formula 4 Championship and the British Formula 3 Championship all in the same year. And then in 69, you won the French Formula 3 Championship. Do you still look back on that with fondness on how much success you had at that time prior to you entering Formula One?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think about it. I don't dream about it or think about it when I do interviews like this. That it reminds me of those days. You mentioned the Formula 3 champion, the French Formula 3 Championship. That was just coincidence, because in '69 there was not an established international Formula 3 Championship or even European Formula 3 Championship. There are lots of Formula 3 races, single events, supporting Grand Prix and supporting the European Formula 2 Championship. And that's sort of the path you followed if you wanted to get into Formula One. But it was just by coincidence. I did a couple of Formula 3 races as part of that in France, and I ended up winning the championship. So that was, as I say, that wasn't by design. But I mean, if you look at '68, I mean, that was an incredible year. I won pretty much every Formula Ford race I drove in. And I started partway through the year, probably Easter, with Formula 3, and I managed to win the British Formula 3 Championship. So that was pretty cool.
Where did the opportunity to get into Formula One come for you around that time? Because obviously you started with Frank Williams, with his original iteration of Williams Grand Prix, which was Frank Williams race cars. And then, of course, you went on to race for Surtees, for Trojan, of course, and then for Brabham before that. And you had one race for Lotus to finish off your career in 1974. But where did that opportunity first arrive for you to drive for Frank Williams?
Well, I was always, that's what I wanted to do. That was my ambition, of course, was my dream was to become to become world champion, to be honest. So I was doing Formula 3, of course, '69, and then it was into Formula 2. And the pathway was much the same as it is today, Formula 3, Formula 2, Formula 1. Not as structured as it is today, but it was much the same pathway. Now, I was doing Formula 2 1970. Piers Courage was killed in one of Frank Williams' cars at Zandvoort. Terrible accident there. And I knew Frank. I just took a deep breath and went to see him at his workshops in Slough and talk to him about considering me to drive for him for the remaining races of the year. That was a difficult meeting for me to make that decision and to go to see Frank. But that's how I ended up driving the Di Tommaso.
In terms of difficulty, was it just difficult knowing that they were still reeling from Pierre's tragic passing at Zandvoort?
Well, it's hard to remember, but it's not the sort of thing anyone would like to do, to be honest. But as I say, it was tough, but and he took me on. So I think Brian Redmond did a race or two, and then I did 4 or 5 races. He's very much underfunded the team. Tremendous enthusiasm, Frank Williams. He was always going to get there. It was just a question of when. So that's where I started.
In '71, you drove for Sir Jack. and the Brabham team, and you got some fairly decent results. Two points finishes that year in 71, plus your only podium of your career at the Austrian Grand Prix. That's a career highlight for you, I'm sure. Do you remember the Austrian Grand Prix itself and how it all panned out to get that podium?
Yes and no. I mean, these are pretty distant memories now.
Of course.
The trophy used to be in the background there. So I had the Formula One exhibition, which is in Melbourne, opening in about 10 days' time. They contacted me and they wanted an old helmet and they wanted that trophy, so it's down there. So I really started with Brabhams in '69 because the Brabham, the Formula 3 Brabham I was driving was what you called in those days a work-assisted drive. Brabhams provided the chassis, rolling chassis and gearbox, and I had a team that provided the engine, the mechanics, and we went to the races. So I had that association quite early on with Brabhams, and then into Formula 2 was the same. And then into Formula 1. I had a difficult time at the start in Formula 1. For some reason, I just didn't click with the car. I'd been successful in all the other, or competitive in all the other junior formulae I'd raced in. And then it suddenly just came together. And from then... as I say, I went on and third place at the Austrian Grand Prix. But I was also I can't remember if it was prior to that, I was also running at the front in the French Grand Prix and the British Grand Prix. I think I was running third when the gearbox broke. But like all race drivers, if only, we can all say if only. But the facts are, it's the results that count, not the if onlys.
If onlys, you don't think about the if onlys, you just think of the actual moments when they happen. Yeah. You're very fortunate to be one of only 6 drivers from Australia to have finished.
Can I just correct you there?
Yeah, sure.
It's not a question of being fortunate. I was good enough.
That's a good point, actually. You're very good enough. Very good enough, actually. You're right. To be one of 6 Australians to finish on a podium in Formula 1. And you join Sir Jack Brabham, Mark Webber, Daniel Ricciardo, Alan Jones, and of course Oscar Piastri, who's done so well this year. I know you're very good enough. Do you feel also privileged that you're one of those 6 to have finished on a podium and fly the Australian flag?
Yes, I certainly feel privileged. Of course, as I said earlier, Formula 1 had nowhere near the media coverage it has today. But in some ways, I could say, well, it just didn't click for me. I just didn't quite make it there. Would have loved to have done better, of course. But on the other hand, when I look at a grid sheet nowadays from the 70s and look at who's around and some of the tragedies, I suppose I'm lucky to have got through all of that. I mean, at the time, the cars you raced were the state of the art. And you look at a 250F Maserati, any of those front engine cars of the 60s, and even the Coopers and Lotuses of rear engine of the time. The cars we were racing had monocoque chassis and they had bag tanks, and we had a roll hoop, mind you, it only came halfway up your neck, but we had fireproof overalls and seatbelts and all of this. So it was, as I say, the state of the art at the time. You look at the cars today and you go, oh my God almighty. But it's much the same with a road car. You look at a 60s road car to today's road cars.
Absolutely.
Same sort of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's so different. You can't compare.
Yeah.
It's like comparing apples to oranges. But
yes,
you must have clicked eventually when you decided to go sports car racing, and you had more success with sports car racing than you did for Formula 1. I'm not saying that you weren't successful in Formula 1, but the results definitely show that you had a synergy racing sports car racing, and your association with Ferrari, one of a few Australians to race for the Scuderia brand itself. What a privilege to be a part of Enzo Ferrari during that time of motorsport.
Yeah, actually, if you look back at 1972 and that sports car season with Ferrari, I'm sure I'm right in saying we won every race we entered, or Ferrari won every race it entered that year. Didn't do Le Mans, but and it won that championship hands down. But it was an incredible team. Peter Shetty was the team manager, so you had it was perhaps a bit like an older version of Jean Todt and Ross Brawn. So you had very well organised team. Each driver had two cars, so whilst you were racing one, the other car was being prepared for the next race. So you were driving the same car every second race. So it was an incredible team, an incredible year, and of course, driving with Ronnie, who I got to know very well, probably my closest friend in racing.
Ronnie Peterson, we're talking about.
Yeah. There's only one Ronnie.
Yeah. Just so our younger listeners, they might not know who you're talking about, but just wanted to clear it. It's Ronnie Peterson, a great driver in his own right. He was a very, very talented man and represented Sweden very, very strongly. I do remember. I didn't see him race because I was born just after he passed, but I've seen some vision, and he was a very, very highly regarded driver for his time.
Well, he was the fastest man over a single lap in that era, and absolutely no question about that. Unbelievable car control, just an absolute natural. But again, just getting back to that team, you had Andretti, Nixon, Redmond, and Helmut Marko did a race. Carlos Pache. It was a Turo Mazzario. It was an incredible team. So, but it's now that I sort of appreciate it more. At the time, it's just a race car. It's a tool, I suppose, to some degree. It sounds a bit churlish, doesn't it? But and you're there to go racing, and you're there to win races. So it just all clicked. It all just clicked.
When you look at what Ferrari have achieved this year in the World Endurance Championship, does that sort of, bring back some joy for you, having been a former Ferrari driver, to see the success that they've had in this year's World Endurance Championship, which includes a Le Mans win? Oh,
yes, certainly. I mean, if Ferrari is the iconic team, isn't it? It's there. It's been there for forever, and it's. Formula One needs Ferrari, but Ferrari also needs Formula One. But and in anything, any Ferrari, your road going car. I mean, there's something special about Ferrari, and the name is very special. I just wanted to go back just briefly. Also mention in '72, that was the year Fiorano, the Ferrari test circuit, opened. So we had a test track there as well. So it was incredibly professional, and the opposition perhaps wasn't that strong. The following year, 73, I drove with Carlos Reutemann. We didn't do all the races, but that's when Matra came along. Matra had a much more sophisticated car, and they managed. They had a better car than Ferrari.
I just want to mention some of the successes that you had during that time with Ferrari. You won the Buenos Aires and Nürburgring 1,000-kilometre events in that year. So we're talking the original Nürburgring as well, not the 4.5-kilometre Grand Prix circuit that we know these days, but the original Leuschleife. And then you also finished second at Sebring, second at Daytona in the 6-hour race, second in Brands Hatch in the 1,000-kilometre race there, and also the Watkins Glen 6-hour. And then you finished third at Monza and the Zeltweg 1,000-kilometre races. I mean, that is an incredible list of achievements that you achieved throughout that 1972 season.
I have to say that sounds impressive even to me.
What was the most satisfying race of that year that you still remember fondly? Was it Nürburgring or was it Buenos Aires?
Well, I think any race you win, you remember fondly. So, and it's a bit like people ask me quite often, what's your favourite racetrack? Well, your favourite racetrack are the tracks you won on. I mean, Nürburgring was special. I actually won the 1,000-kilometre race again in my last year, 1977. So I won that race twice. Well, when I say I won it, you're driving in a team, so it's not.
And you won it for Porsche. You won it for Porsche in '77 too.
That's right. But I learned Nürburgring in 1969, driving for Ford Germany in a 3-litre Capri on the North and South Circuit in an 82-hour touring car race. That's where I learned. That's where I learned the Nürburgring.
82 hours.
Yeah, 82. Well, we didn't last 82 hours. I think we retired after about 60 hours. But that's. So it was the North and South Circuit combined. I think it's 29 kilometres for a lap, and that's really where I learned the Nürburgring.
Was it daunting, the Nürburgring, or did you just went in there and just did it?
Well, I was there early for the race. I was, you could, in those days you paid 10 marks or whatever it was, and you could do a guest lap. So Ford gave me, I had a road car, a Capri, I imagine it was. And so I was just doing practice laps. So I had a couple of crashes. So they had another car for me, which was pretty cool. But of course, in a Group N, I suppose, so that's a modified production car, 3-litre Capri. You can't compare that, of course, of doing Nürburgring in a Formula One Brabham or a 312 PB Ferrari sports car. But at least you know which way the road went.
Absolutely. You still admire the place all these years on, the Nürburgring?
Yes, I went there some years ago. I was a steward there for the 24-hour race there. And I did a lap there. Yes, I can remember it. But interestingly enough, my son Guido, he races on at sim racing, and he knows it like the back of his hand.
Does he do it on iRacing, or does he do it on some of the other simulators that are available?
Well, I'm not sure. But he knows it like all the circuits you learn on the back of your hand, and you can see now today. Just to relate that today and look at Antonelli and Max. I mean, they know the circuits. They don't have to drive out and drive around or walk around to see which way the corners go. They already know all of that. And because the correlation between the simulator and the actual race car is so close, they immediately know which corners are flat. So it's no surprise that they're already doing competitive laps after 3 or 4 laps.
I'm just staggered how someone like Max Verstappen, he can just get into a GT3 car or do sim racing, do laps around the Nürburgring, and he's instantly competitive. Obviously, the sim racing helped him with his GT3 efforts recently in between races. But, he's just an absolute freak when it comes to his driving talent. Like, his craft is so meticulous, he's very dedicated, and his success obviously speaks volumes in terms of his World Championship titles.
There's no question. I mean, he's special. He's special.
A very dedicated driver in the sense that he's dedicated someone like Senna or some of the contemporaries of your day.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can't go racing, can't go Formula One car racing as a bit of fun. But absolutely. And as you say, if he's not in a race car, he's sim racing, or he's in the simulator at the Milton Keynes where the factory is. He's just passionate about it. And it's not as if he sort of got bored with it. I'm sure when he stops Formula One racing, he will continue on. And I think I've read a number of times he's keen to do Le Mans, for example. So
I'm sure he's very keen to do it once his Formula One career is over. I'm pretty sure he'll do Bathurst as well. I have no doubt that he'll come and do Bathurst one day, and he'll absolutely wipe the slate clean of everyone around him. Well, maybe not, but he'll give it a good shake, I reckon.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Absolutely. You retired in 1977. You mentioned that your last win with the Nürburgring 1000 was in 77, the year that you drove for Porsche. When was the moment that you decided that was it, time to get out and focus on a different path in your career?
It was probably back in 1974. I drove for Trojan. That was a Formula One car designed by Ron Touranak. I struggled in that. There was a problem with the car. In fact, only shortly before Ron died, he passed away. Ron Touranek passed away. He told me that what the problem was. But anyhow, at that point, I'd had my chance at Formula One. I couldn't see myself getting back into it. So I was already starting to think about what I would do. When I retired, I continued racing. I was driving for a very wealthy German team owner, Georg Luss. He'd made a lot of money in property development in Cologne in Germany. So I was driving Porsches. He had a 91710 Can-Am car. He bought some of the Mirage 3-litre Cosworth sports cars as well. So I was sort of still racing, but it wasn't the same as doing Formula One. And 76, someone approached me with an idea to build Formula Ford cars, and he had a proposal. I looked at that. I didn't really understand business, not that I understand it today, but I took it to a friend of mine, Howden Ganley, New Zealand Formula One driver, who had a business, a race gearbox rebuilding business. And he looked at it and came back some days later and said, "This looks quite promising, but why don't you and I do it?" And that's how I started into the business of building Tiga Race Cars in '76, and that went on till I went to America in '82. But so I was involved in that and racing at the same time. But that was a sort of crossover. Then when I stopped in '77. I was full-time involved in building race cars.
That's an incredible success as well, Tiga Race Cars, because you achieved a success not just in America and in Europe, but also in Australia. You won 2 Australian Drivers' Championships as a manufacturer for Alfie Costanzo in 1982 and 83. And I still remember growing up, reading magazines, and this is showing my age here, showing photos like advertorials of Peter Jackson, because Alfie was sponsored by Peter Jackson or Philip Morris back in the day, and the car was splendid in the Peter Jackson livery. This is pre-Gibson Motorsport days, back in the late 80s into the early 90s. So the car just looked absolutely beautiful for its time, and Alfie had great success beating the likes of John Bowe, winning the Cam's Gold Star as it was back in the day.
Well, Alfie was special as well. He was a great driver as well. I actually raced against him in the 60s. I had a Lotus 18. He had a Lotus 20, I think, which should have been a faster car, and it was faster. He was fast as well. He was just a bit erratic, to say the least. But I did a couple of races against Alfie. But everything needs to work for you to win in motor racing, even back in my days in the 60s and 70s. So you've got to be the drive, you've got to have the right car, you've got to have the right team around you to be successful. More important now, you could argue, but it was still always an important factor. So Alfie driving for Alan Hamilton, that was a great team, well-funded and professional team.
Absolutely, with the support of Porsche as well. And there's that link with you and Porsche all over again. It must have felt... I guess very special to have that link with Porsche and Tiga Race Cars through Alan Hamilton and having that success during the early to mid 80s.
Yes, absolutely.
Le Mans, I want to touch on that as well. And that was something I wanted to touch on before. You didn't have as much success as you would have liked. You did 5 starts at Le Mans and you only finished once, and that was back in just looking at your history of results here, back in 1976. And you were very lucky that you drove for Ferrari at Le Mans in 1973 with Carlos Reutemann. You didn't finish that race. You also drove for Simca, for Matra, of course, and you drove with some very good drivers in their day too, and Jean-Pierre Jabouille and Patrick Depailler. I mean, there's some really impressive names that you drove with at Le Mans, but just the results just didn't come the way. Is that one regret, not getting a Le Mans win?
It's sort of yes and no. I mean, Le Mans is a great race win to have on your CV. You say I did it. How many times did I do it?
5 times. 5 or 6. Five times.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is I'm recorded to have finished, and I don't ever remember finishing the race there. So finishing one, but I'm not going to argue with the statistics, but. My first race was 1970 with Matra. As you say, I drove with Dupaille and Jabouille, but they were very protective of their car and their drive. So in practice, they gave me a couple of laps at night, and that was it. And the race, the car retired very early on. Ferrari was different. Ferrari, they really put a big effort in for 1973. But apart from Azario, who partway through the race, I think he had a clutch change or gearbox change, the other cars retired. That was Ixon, Redman and Reutemann and myself. I think Reutemann and I were leading when it retired, probably 2:00 in the morning, something like that. But Le Mans was a very different race, and you were driving, which strangely enough is very hard. We were driving as a single-seater or Grand Prix driver. You were driving some 5 seconds off the pace. And, it's hard to keep your concentration up driving that slowly. It just sounds silly, but it is. It's hard to drive slowly, consistently, and keep your concentration going, because that's the most important part of it. I'm sure Le Mans is the same today. There are some people in the race, you wonder where they got their licenses from. They must have got them from a Wheaties packet, because they're amateurs. They're amateurs. So that was also a big thing in my time. You just had to be very patient, not rushing to overtake people, and just be very cautious.
In terms of driving slowly, was it just more navigating the traffic, or was it more just having to be consistent with your lap times, minute after minute after minute to last the 24 hours?
Well, it's how to drive slower, keep the brakes warm, keep the tires warm, keep your concentration up, because you can't just cruise around, one hand on the wheel and the other on the window ledge.
Well, you couldn't do a Peter Brock, that's for sure.
That's right. So it's just one of those things. Hard to explain, but the most important thing is to keep your concentration going.
I noticed in the record, your last year that you raced, 1977, you actually had 2 bites of the cherry at Le Mans. So you had, for the Gallo team that you were driving for, they entered 2 cars, both with yourself and Tyne Huysmans and Hans Heyer, and both cars in that same race retired. So there was one car that retired after 15 laps, and you got into another car. I think you must have been cross-entered somewhere along the line, and it lasted much longer, but you didn't make the finish either. I think you got to about 269 laps. So 77 was just, one of those years you had 2 cars, 2 bites of the cherry, but you just couldn't get to the finish.
Yeah, well, you're right. He did have, Jello Racing had 2 cars entered, and you were entered in both cars, so you could change cars. I thought my car stopped. I started the race and I thought it broke on the first lap, just before the pits. I came into the pit lane, and then Twan and I were out. And shortly after, the team owner, Georg Luce, came up and said, I want you to take over the other car, because the other drivers aren't so experienced. Ironically, one of the other drivers was Klaus Ludwig, who went on to win multiple Le Mans.
And a very successful driver in his own right too.
So we took the car over, and we were doing really well, but I can't remember, it was after midday on the Sunday afternoon, the car didn't come round. It had stopped on Mulsanne Straight. In those days, you could go out to the car. So one of the mechanics went out there. He couldn't work on the car. Only the driver with the tools on board could work on the car. So that's still the same today. And they quickly established that the fuel pump belt had broken. So the mechanic said, wait there, Twan, and he went back to the pits, got a belt, put it into one of those long baguettes, sandwiches, and took it back to the car, back to Twan, said to the marshals there, the driver's hungry. He wants to have something to eat.
I can see where this is going.
Hazelman's worked out what was going on there. So, of course, took the sandwich round the back of the car, out of sight of the marshals, took the belt out and refitted the belt. It would be a great story if it had a great ending, but unfortunately, the fuel pump had seized. So when he went to start the engine, it just broke the belt again. So we're out of the race.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. But great memories of Le Mans when you look back on your attempts to race at Le Mans?
Well, great memories everywhere you race, to be honest, everywhere you race. And I've raced pretty much around the world. South Africa, South America, North America, all through Europe, Japan, Australia. So it's been a special time. Just while you're talking about two drivers in the same car, in '76, I was racing in the European GT Championship, which were long distance races at Monza, and again, Luce, he had two cars entered, only three drivers. So I was swapping between the two cars. We ended up finishing first and second. So the cars finished first and second. So I was first and second in the same race.
That's pretty impressive. So,
well, this is one of those odd things that happens every now and then. The other great thing was my wife was heavily pregnant, and when I went back home Sunday night, to arrive, and our son Guido was born, so it made the day even more special.
It's incredible. You decided to come home in the mid-1980s after all the success racing, and then, of course, with your construction business with Tiga. What made you to decide to come home and go down the road of becoming a race official, a Clerk of Course, which you did so successfully for many years?
Well, I suppose I'd retired from racing, building race cars. I had a family, my wife, Brigitte, Guido, I've mentioned before, twin daughters, Natalie and Laura, and I could see that the future was better for us as a family to come back to Australia. So I was already thinking about that in the late 70s. And then in 82, I had an opportunity to go to America, to San Diego, and run as team manager for John Fitzpatrick. He was running in the IMSA Championship. So I did 2 years there, 82 and 83. I think I've got it about right. Yeah, 82, 83. And then John was going to move his team back to Europe. And I'd been writing to people in Australia and trying to find a job. I'd been written to some of the circuits, looking for a position as a manager of a circuit, to some of the manufacturers, and I wasn't getting anywhere. And then I read an article I think it was probably Auto Action, about CAMS and a 10-year plan for the future of motorsport in Australia. So I wrote to CAMS. John Keefe was the Secretary General, as the title was in those days. And I had a response saying, no, we don't have a position open. And then out of the blue, I had another letter, or probably a telex in those days, saying, no, something's opened up. Would you come out and interview for the job? So I flew out from San Diego, interviewed for the job, got the job, went back to San Diego, packed everything up and came back to Australia in 84. And I think I started at CAMS on the 1st of April, 1984.
They must have thought it was an April Fool's joke. And you've been with them for 40 years ever since as a race director for the Australian Touring Car Championship, which you took up in 1987, which evolved into Supercars during that mid-1990s, and you retired from that role in 2021. And that included, along the way, being Clerk of Course for not just the Australian Grand Prix, which you held for many years, but also for the Bathurst 1000. And that must have been probably one of the hardest jobs that you've had to do in your career, looking after a race meeting and making sure that everything ran as well as it could each year?
Yes. Well, first of all, just to go quickly back to 84, I mean, that was a huge learning curve for me. I'd never worked really in an administration. To arrive at CAMS and having to fit into administration. I left school very early. I couldn't see how school didn't have a subject how to be a Formula One race driver, so I left school as early as I could to follow that pathway. But yes, I suppose it's a bit like, I don't know how to explain it. First of all, you've got a Clerk of Course, and the Clerk of Course, you may be race director, but the Clerk of Course is your main man at a race track, because he knows the circuit intimately. He knows all his officials. He knows the capabilities of his officials. So you rely on him very heavily as a race director. He's a very important component of it. But running I suppose, as a race director, running a series, and I think of it, I often explain it this way: what's the role of the race director? The role of the race director is to try to provide for the teams and drivers consistency. So the way the practices are conducted, the way the safety car operates, and everyone has a subtle difference to the way they manage all of these things, the race start, all of that. It needs to be consistent. So for the teams and drivers, the only difference from race to race is a different racetrack. Everything else works the same way. So that it's a bit like running a team, I suppose. As a team manager, you're having to make decisions on matters as they happen. It's all very well watching it on TV and reading about it later and saying he should have done this and he should have done that. The facts are, if you're deploying a safety car, full course yellow, red flag, you're making a decision based on the information you have right at that moment, safety being the most critical part of all of it. So it's a huge challenge, and it's very satisfying. I really enjoyed all of my time as Clerk of Course, whether it was a Grand Prix or Bathurst, and as race director. It's as I say, it's a huge challenge, and I've worked alongside some fantastic people.
I want to touch on a couple of races that have stuck in my mind for years, and I want to get your perspective on those races that you looked over during your career. I want to start with Bathurst 87, the World Championship race. Do you remember having to deal with not just the local administration, but also the FIA at the time, given it was a World Championship race, and the controversy that surrounded the World Championship that year?
Yes, in a way, I'm a bit remote from all of that, because whilst the FIA came to the race, they had stewards there, they had a technical delegate there. It was nowhere near the same level that you have, say, at an international or an FIA championship race now. I don't think we had a race director. I'm quite sure we didn't have a race director at that time. Race director was probably introduced, I'm guessing, around 1987, Roland Brunserad in Formula One. That's where the role first started. So there was very little interference in my role in race control. There was virtually no interference at all. Or interference is the wrong word, because that sounds like people meddling. But there was no presence in race control. So you just ran the race, and it came off to all the technical side. Of course, that's dealt with by the technical people. You're certainly remote from that.
Oh, well, at least you weren't able to think about all the ramifications that happened post-race, and Brock going on to win number 9. But you were, I guess, right smack bang in the middle at the time when you were the first Clerk of Course to implement the safety car at Bathurst. And I know a lot of fans kind of get sick of safety cars these days, but back in 1987, after all these years of seeing tilt trays driving on the circuits and everything, which probably gave heart attacks to so many drivers, the call to bring the first safety car out in the 87 race, I mean, that was like a big game changer for back in the day.
Yeah, but bear in mind, I'd been running in America, been running a race team in America for 2 years. I understood how safety cars, or in America, of course, US is called pace car, understood the concept. So that wasn't so difficult. And also in those days, you couldn't drive a touring car for 1,000 kilometres or 500 miles, whatever it was, flat out the whole way. You had to look after it. And you might also remember that your second driver wasn't so important. You just put someone in the car to look after the car, for the middle stint, and then you'd finish the race off. So the racing certainly wasn't as intense as it is today.
And 1992, like, you had to deal with a lot of things that day. The weather, stopping the race with about, I think, 19 laps to go when the rain hit. It was a very controversial race for a number of reasons, obviously with the way the race ended and the outcome, of course, with Mark escaped Jim Richards. I mean, there was so much going on that day. What's your memories on that?
Well, my memory on that, actually, the big thing that happened on that was when the rain came. And at the time, I was asked to write a report on it, and it's something like in 20 or 30 seconds, we had 13 cars go off, all pretty much on the same lap. So the decision to red flag it wasn't difficult. I think am I right in saying Jim crashed?
He did.
Going out of Forest Elbow.
He did.
I think the marshals reported in that it was a fuel leak. I think fuel leak, there was fuel on the track or oil on the track. I think in the end that wasn't, in fact, didn't happen. But so it was quite straightforward that. Of course, we didn't have a safety car in those days at Bathurst. So the decision was to red flag it right near the end. So there was no question of continuing. That was it.
I do have to correct you. There were safety cars in 92. Yeah.
Well, why didn't I deploy the safety car?
That's an interesting. But as you said, there was like a number of cars that were going off. So you probably made the right call at that time to stop the race. Although maybe Dick Johnson might disagree with you on making that call in the end.
So there was a safety car. We were using
you were using safety cars. Yeah, during the race there was. And I know that was deployed when Denny Holm, that is sadly pulled across and was sadly...
Don't remind me.
Oh, okay. Well, I won't do that.
A very sad day. He was a hero of mine, Denny. He was a hero of mine. To have watched him racing in the days of the Tasman Championship and then be on the grid with him in Formula One was something special.
Yeah.
Okay. So, for whatever reason, yes, red flag. That was over. Maybe the rain was even too torrential to put the safety car out and continue. I'm sure some of your listeners will know.
They'll know exactly, and we know the outcome of what Jim said on the podium that day. Actually, if you had the benefit of hindsight, would you have penalised Jim for what he said, or do you think he was right to say what he said that day when the crowd got a bit rowdy?
Well, I mean, nowadays, of course, you've got to be careful what you say.
Absolutely.
When you're public speaking. So it was appropriate for the time.
I think it's a very apt answer. I like that for a fact. Murph in 2002, and then, of course, in 2003. You two didn't necessarily have the best relationships during that time because we know what happened in the pits, and that was just, an unfortunate incident. But that 5-minute penalty, it stirred up a lot of emotions in 2002. Do you remember?
You've got to remember, I don't think many people or everyone actually understands this. The Clerk of Course race director, they don't issue the penalties.
Okay.
Done by the stewards. The stewards are a body independent of the race organisation, just as it is in a real court, in real life. The judicial system is a separation of power, and all those decisions are made by the stewards. So what we do as a Clerk of Course or as a race director is you implement those decisions. You don't really have a say in them.
I think it's kind of lost on some of the drivers these days. They think it's the Clerk of Course and they want to lay the blame on the Clerk of Course, whereas you have no say in it. It's the stewards that do it. You just oversee everything in the end.
That's right, yes. And you're too busy dealing with the racing. You haven't got time to go off and analyse an incident, discuss what a penalty should be. If you were to do that, then you're not doing your job. That's not what your job is. The Clerk of Course, has a huge responsibility on the Clerk of Course to manage the racing, manage it as safely as possible, look after his marshals, and the race director, if there is one appointed, working alongside him, or him or her. When I say him, I mean him and her.
Yeah, of course.
Because we have some very capable girls as Clerks of Course and race
Well,
directors.
I know one of them very well too, and Jess Nicholson, who's been running the Toyota GR Cup, and she's very, very good. I've known her for a long time, and she's a very, very capable administrator in the sport. Fantastic.
Yes. No, I agree.
You've stepped away in recent years from being the race director for Supercars and Clerk of Course, but you're still involved with Motorsport Australia. Explain what your current day role is at Motorsport Australia.
Well, I don't have a full-time job there. I'm not employed by Motorsport Australia.
Okay.
I'm on some of their committees, or one in particular is called the National Regulation Advisory Committee. When Motorsport Australia, you need to, regulations, they get stale very quickly. So I'm part of a small group there working on regulations, editing them, and just and making sure there's consistency the way they're written. But I'm also on the FIA Circuits Commission, and I'm one of their Platinum inspectors, and I'm responsible for most of Southeast Asia. So I'm doing lots of circuit inspections. I've just come back from a couple of weeks ago doing Macau and Zhuhai, which is a circuit close to Macau. And then I'm going this week to do 2 circuits in South Korea. So it's I'm still occupied, and I love it. I enjoy it, and it keeps the brain going.
Absolutely. Actually, Macau was great for Australians on a world stage, because Josh Buchan won the TCR World Tour event. That must have put a big smile on your face to see an Aussie win probably one of the most prestigious motorsport events in the world in the Macau Grand Prix.
Well, it's an incredibly difficult circuit. If you look at Macau today, if it was, the race was to be held for the first time there, under the current regulations, you'd probably be struggling to make the circuit comply. It is a classic street circuit, probably more classic than Monaco is, but like Pau in south of France, they are fantastic tracks. And to finish there without hitting anything is one thing, but to win is something very special.
I was recently in Wellington in New Zealand. I was there on a holiday with my wife, and Wellington, of course, used to host the street race around the ports there of Wellington. And I remember reading years ago when the first Wellington 500 race was held around the streets of Wellington. It was supposed to be an international race, but John Roxburgh, the late John Roxburgh, who was then the CAMS delegate at the time, he wouldn't issue an international race permit because he didn't feel the track was up to international standards, so the regulations were rewritten to race as a national event. So, I find it staggering how Wellington, had to struggle initially, and then it became an international event. So it's not as easy as just turning up to a track and say, yeah, that's fine. It's a very, very intricate process to get the approval, isn't it?
I remember that race well. I was there. But when you look at the way licensing circuit license applications go today, you can't compare it. You've got quite a process of the plans, the specifications of all the safety installations, the process that goes through at the FIA. They have a very clever computer program that simulates the speeds of the cars on the track, the runoff areas, the distances of the runoff areas. So a lot of all of that work is done for new circuits at the FIA. And then an inspector would go there with all the information and just check everything is in place. So the 2 circuits I'm doing this week are both established circuits. So it's really just an audit and a check. I make it sound simple because I say that because it's not as complicated as going to a circuit for the first time.
Exactly. Just quickly before we move on to the next part of the pod, I want to ask, in terms of drivers, the ones that you've witnessed over the years, both as a driver and also as a administrator in the sport, who are the drivers that really impressed you throughout your career?
The number's huge. The number's huge. There's no... I couldn't go through it. I would offend somebody because I've forgotten their name. But
that's okay.
the number is huge. If to win the Australian Touring Car Championship, you've got to be outstanding. Perhaps to finish in the first three, you've got to be something special. And when you look at FIA, Formula 3, Formula 2, Formula 1, much the same. If you look at karting today, karting is the same. To be winning at that level, it's so competitive now. Not that it wasn't in my time; it was competitive then. But you have to be so good, if that's all right, so skilled to move on up the ladder. So they're all brilliant. They're all brilliant.
I got to ask you then about Oscar. Obviously, we were recording this with a couple of races remaining in the World Championship, and it's been a very difficult time for Oscar in the last few races. Obviously, he's lost the championship lead, and Lando's now leading the world title. Even if he doesn't win the world title this year, do you believe he's still got the clout to win a world title? Because I certainly believe that he can.
That's no question whatsoever. He will be a world champion. He'll be Australia's third world champion. And he's got the guidance of Mark Webber as well. And Mark very skillfully just keeps out of the limelight, but he's in very good hands there, and he's got the skill. To win the FIA Formula 3 Championship and to win the Formula 2 Championship, that's not luck, that's skill. So he'll be a world champion.
I don't disagree with that. I remember interviewing him a few years ago when Trevor Long had his podcast for his EFTM network. And Oscar, very lovely guy, very modest, and just goes about his business without any fuss at all. And he still does that now with Formula One. And I'm pretty sure he will win a world championship. There's no question in my mind. I also want to ask you about Alan Moffat. We're recording this a few days after his unfortunate passing, as inevitable as it was. Alan was a very talented driver, a very intense driver at the best of times, and also he had his battles on the track with so many of his contemporaries, as well as off the track with Officialdon, and I'm sure you had a number of clashes with him in your time. What was Alan like? What's your fondest memories with Alan?
Well, I didn't have any clashes with him because I've got a sort of there's a pause in my Australian motorsport involvement, and because I was away from 1966 to 1984, and that was the time when the Brocks and Moffats were the men. My memories of Alan Moffat. When I first started racing, I actually worked and went to some races with him. He had a Triumph TR3A, and I went to a couple of races with him at Calder. And I have to say, Alan would struggle in those days to put 2 or 3 laps together without spinning off the track. But when it comes to absolute dedication, bloody-mindedness, whatever you call it, he was determined to be a top driver. A bit like Nigel Mansell, here's another one. No natural skill at all. He had to work at it, and that's what Alan Moffat was determined to do. And it just shows you he was successful, hugely successful.
What about Peter Brock?
Same there. I mean, Peter Brock. He started in Austin A30. I started in Austin
I was going to mention that because, the Austin A30.
But I had an Austin Healey engine in mine, Austin Healey Sprite engine. I think he had a Holden engine in his.
Yeah.
Again, I didn't know Peter Brock at all until I came back to Australia, and he was still incredibly successful. But he just had a personality about him that and look, and he was every bit a race driver, and he looked the part. And he was skillful, of course. Natural racer.
Very skillful. Dick Johnson?
Dick, again, I knew nothing about Dick Johnson till I came back here and Group A was introduced here. So apart from and seeing him from race control racing, and you don't actually see the racing, you're managing a race. You don't actually see the actual race yourself. In fact, there are times when I've come home and my wife Brigitte said, "Who was quickest today?" "Oh, I don't know." because your focus is on something entirely different. Entirely different.
All right, one more to before we move on. Ayrton Senna. I have, the tremendous amount of respect for Senna and what he did. What's your memories on him?
Senna is one of those people, one of the very few people you meet that have some sort of aura about them. I don't know how you explain it. They just seem to be a little bit different. He was certainly that. Enzo Ferrari was another one. He just seemed to be different from the rest of us, mere mortals. And as a race driver, he, of course, Ayrton was incredibly skillful. But so is Max today, and so is Jackie Stewart at his time, and Jimmy Clark, Alan Jones, Jack Brabham, to bring an Australian flavour to it. But Ayrton was just a little bit different.
What about Enzo? You obviously worked under Enzo. What was he like as a personality?
Much the same thing. I don't know, just something when you're with these people, they just seem to be, you can't put your finger on it, you can't explain exactly what it is. They just seem to be that little bit different. Enzo, when I was driving in 72 with Ferrari, we'd be testing at Furano, and he would often come to the test track, come to the testing, and just sit there. Someone would get him a chair, and he'd sit there in pit lane and watch what was going on. He didn't speak English; was very poor. My Italian was very poor. We might go and have lunch. Ronnie and I might go and have lunch with him. But it was, Ferrari, any Italian team, when they're winning, everything is fantastic. When they're not, it's depressing.
Much like in Formula One right now for
Yes.
Ferrari.
I feel for Ferrari in Formula One.
Do you feel
I feel for Lewis Hamilton.
Oh, absolutely. I still can't believe that Lewis at the moment is struggling, and he was like last on the grid. Obviously, he didn't start 20th and last in Vegas, but that would just be disheartening for him, given his World Championship successes, 8 times World Champion, 7 times World Champion, and yeah, he's struggling at the back of the grid. Like, he must be thinking to himself, do I really want to keep racing right now?
Well, it's a question of believing in yourself.
Absolutely.
He's not racing because he wants to drive around midfield and he needs a few dollars. He's racing because he believes he can still win. And that's as I say, believing in yourself is the most important thing.
This is the Motor Dream Podcast.
All right, Tim, you are very much ensconced in cars, in motorsport. It's been a passion of yours, since you were growing up, from your early days growing up in Sydney's North Shore. But I want to find out a little bit more about what makes you tick around cars. So I'm just going to ask a few questions. So I promise you it won't be too difficult, but I want to know a little bit more. I want to know the first car that you drove.
First car I drove would have been my mother's Morris Minor.
Ooh, a Morris Minor. For those, I would recommend our younger listeners go and look them up, because the Morris Minor, they were the cars to have in the day. They were just a very simple, cheap car that you can just buy and drive around, go to the shops too, and they'll take you from A to B.
It would have been driving up and down the driveway in Canterbury on our home and drive in Melbourne.
How long were you in Sydney before you moved to Melbourne, just out of curiosity?
12 years.
Okay.
12 years in Sydney, my first 12 years, of course, and then moved to Melbourne.
Right. What about the first car that you owned? Was it the Austin A30?
First car I owned would have been a Vanguard.
Ooh.
A Vanguard. Now, I can't remember the model. It had if you're Google it, had a sloping rear on it, 4-door. It was, so what year would that have been? It would probably be 1960, around there would have been.
Yes, yeah. Like a standard Vanguard, yeah.
That's it, standard Vanguard.
Oh, they're nice. I'm just having a quick look now. Nice for its day. I bought it because I was working for a company in Melbourne called Callow Faulkner, and they were the
BMC and Rolls-Royce and Bentley dealer in Melbourne, distributor. And I've been traded in by a little old lady living in Brighton, I think. But it had a 2-litre Triumph TR4 engine, something like that. So I considered it would be a good tow car. That was my first car.
Fantastic.
First road car.
What about the first road trip that you remember doing in your life?
First road trips probably were with my parents, driving between Sydney to Melbourne. 3 days, I think. First night stopping in Goulburn. Second night stopping probably Albury or Wangaratta, somewhere like that. With a RACV, used to have a little road, a road book, a flip road book, and so it sort of covered every 5 miles. So that was your road atlas, road map, coming from very detailed, coming from Melbourne to Sydney, from Sydney to Melbourne. So
nothing like a GPS that you have in your car these days.
No, absolutely no, nothing like that.
What about the first time that you changed a tyre? Do you remember how old you were?
Oh, I imagine it would have been when I was 18, when I owned a car. So changing a tyre, I'm guessing that Vauxhall.
What Vauxhall was it? You said.
I'm sorry, not Vauxhall.
The Vanguard?
The Vanguard.
Ah,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Vanguard, yeah. I imagine, but I don't recall exactly.
Okay, that's fair enough. What about the kind of music you listen to when you go on a road trip, or do you normally listen to like podcasts or listen to the radio when you go driving?
If I'm listening to the radio, probably 80s.
80s music?
Yeah, Smooth FM.
Well, you're in good company with my wife. She loves Smooth FM, so that's fine. What about eating in cars? Yes or no to that?
Sorry, eating
in cars. Is it a yes or no to that?
No, I don't listen to music.
No. Eating in cars.
Eating in the driving?
Yes.
No.
I'm glad about that. What about getting your license first go? Do you remember you getting your license?
Yes, I remember that. And I remember that because I turned, of course, being passionate about racing and driving license. And so the day I turned 18, I went with my mother to, I think it was Box Hill, to the police station there to, I don't know whether we had learner's permits or whatever, but to get my driver's license. And I didn't take my birth certificate. So I was in tears.
Oh, no.
Because I couldn't get my license. But I was there a week later and got my license. But, been building up for this for years and years and years. And when the moment came, I messed it up because I didn't have my birth certificate.
I remember messing up my first driving test. I've mentioned it in previous episodes with a couple of other guests. I getting into the car, putting the key in the ignition, and I couldn't turn the barrel over. I couldn't work out why, and it worked out that I put the wrong key into the ignition. I don't know how or why, but I couldn't get it out of the barrel, and we had to abort the test, and I had to wait at least another 6 weeks before I tried again. So eventually, I got my license second go. So we all have those stories.
Well, I had to do this. If you've got a minute to hear this,
sure.
A second time. And that was in England, because for years I was living in England, driving in England on a Victorian license, which was a piece of paper in those days, folded up in your wallet, and the thing was all tattered. You could hardly read it. So the time had come to get a British license, and I did a small sponsorship deal with BSM, the British School of Motoring. So I had their professional driving instructor come out and to just take me through the process for passing a test. Well, you develop all these habits which are not appropriate for driving, for going for a driver's license. Heeling and towing, for example, just that was just automatic for me. So none of that, of course, is permitted. So having to unlearn that and concentrate like hell to go and get my driving test. and have BSM, which was promoting this. It must have been paying me, I guess, to and having the press there. This was this was very stressful, but I managed to remember not to heel and toe and not to put it in neutral, coasting up to the lights and all that sort of thing.
Do you still heel and toe when you drive these days, or have you got out of that habit long ago?
Well, I always drive an automatic, but if I drive a manual, I heel and toe.
Yeah, I do the same. Old habits die hard, I think.
Yeah.
All right. What about the best car that you've owned? Can be a race car or a road car.
Oh, that's difficult. I've had some nice cars. I had in the mid-70s, I had a 911S.
Ooh, nice.
Which was a nice car, racing in Europe and going by road to the various tracks. 911S. I had a good contact at Mercedes, again, mid-70s. I used to buy a new Mercedes every year from the factory in Stuttgart. No particular car stands out. They're all great. They're all great. I mean, you drive a modern car today, they're all good. Perhaps for me, too many alarms going off when you're driving. It's got lane assist. It's got, you go near something, it's beeping. There are lights flashing everywhere.
Oh, that's a bane of my existence. I was doing that. Like the lane assist was going off, even though I was trying to stay in my lane because I did a road trip in New Zealand, and it was a Toyota RAV4, and it was just constantly going off. And I'm like, just quit it. I get it. I understand. So I understand the frustrations with you that, too many alarms these days.
Well, the problem is you tend to ignore it, and then the day will come when it's trying to tell you something, and you run into a pole or whatever.
What car do you have at the moment?
I have a T-Rock at the moment.
Oh, a T-Rock.
Well, when I say I have a T-Rock, we just have one car in the family. My wife's car is a T-Rock, so
right.
That. My son works for Hyundai. I often borrow a Hyundai or a Genesis. Genesis is a fantastic car, unbelievable car, but the Koreans have come on something else.
They have come a long way.
Yeah.
Absolute long way. Actually, I've got to ask, obviously, your son obviously has an interest in cars. What about your twins? I know Natalie, she works in the media, much like myself, and I think she worked for Channel 7 until recently. Yes. But she's now doing surfing than doing motorsport. That I do know. She loves the surfing these days.
Yes, she's passionate about it. Discovered it a bit late in life, but she's on her board at 6 o'clock in the morning out surfing. So.
Is she into cars much like yourself?
No, not really. Nor is Laura. Guido's is very much into cars, but Guido didn't really have an interest in racing. I mean, for him, it was just that was what Dad did. You know, Ronnie Peterson, Emerson Fittipaldi, Jackie Stewart. They were just friends of Dad. So this was normal life for him. So, but he enjoys putting a Hyundai on the track nowadays when they go and do a test day, or not a test day, but an open
track
day.
Yeah,
a track day is the right word at Sydney Motorsport Park or wherever.
I do know that when you did retire, that you made a promise not to, get the urge to start racing again. I remember you said in an interview years ago on TV that you didn't have the drive to do it anymore. You stuck to that for many years until you did a Formula 4 test, I think for Auto Action, and when you took the helmet out of storage, the lining inside the helmet all fell apart. Do you want to tell me that story?
Well, that's true, actually. No, I mean, you're never going to be as good as you were, of course. I wouldn't mind doing some stuff. I love historic cars. Well, of the period that when I was growing up, front engine, Maserati, Ferrari, probably Cooper, Lotus of the early 60s, late 50s. That would be quite fun, but not racing them. I'm 82 now, for God's sake, so my time is well and truly past. But I enjoy driving, and I do enjoy driving old cars. That's fun.
I will go back on track now. The worst car that you've ever owned. Have you got a car that you've had in your life where you've gone, I really don't want to own that ever again?
Probably that standard Vanguard. I remember, one of the reasons I bought it because someone said it's a good vehicle for towing. So I had my Lotus 18 in an enclosed trailer, and whatever you did, you could never go. The first time actually, I was on the Hume Highway going up to Winton, got to 60 miles an hour, 100 kilometres an hour, and the trailer started swinging.
Mm.
My friend with me said, "Oh, just flatten it." Well, come on now, flatten it. It was 60 miles an hour. We were probably going downhill. It was about as fast as you could go. This thing was all over the road. So I could never, ever, despite what I did with the trailer, which way round I put the car on the trailer, it would always have that problem at 60. So worst car, I guess, was probably that standard Vanguard.
That's pretty apt, I think. The first car turned out to be the worst car. If it didn't handle road safety, and the roads now, probably better,
Yeah.
but it probably would have been shocking roads back in that time when you were growing up.
Well, that was the way the road was. Single carriageway was a Hume Highway, Sydney to Melbourne. There was going up towards Kilmore, there was a hill called Pretty Sally Hill, and that was a big deal if you could get up that hill in third gear. That was fantastic. If you going up in second gear was normal.
Mm.
I went there some years later. Guido was playing at a soccer match out at Kilmore, and we went out there. This is 20 years ago or so, more than 20 years ago. And I wondered where Pretty Sally Hill was. And I got to Kilmore and I couldn't work it out. Where was the hill? This was the old Hume freeway, the whole Hume highway, should I say. Where was this hill? And I asked somebody there and it told me what to look out for. When I went back to Melbourne, it's just a slight incline. I imagined it like going up Everest. But, so the point being, the cars, the roads, everything has changed so much. You can't compare it.
No, absolutely not. The best road trip that you've ever been on? It can be anywhere in the world that you've, in your travels throughout your career. Is there like a particular time in your life where you've done a road trip, be it in Europe or in America or even here in Australia, and you've gone, that's a great road trip that I've enjoyed?
Probably. Oh my God, you're asking some difficult questions.
I
here.
am.
What comes to mind was in that Porsche, that 911S going from Stuttgart must have had a race in Italy. And rather than going through the St. Gotthard Pass, we decided I'd go over the Alps. So that was I suppose that was pretty special. Tiny, narrow road, zigzagging up over the Alps, and getting to the top and coming down the other side and then looking across the northern plains of Italy, having been gone, as I say, through the snow up over the top. I guess that was probably it.
All right, final question before we move on to the Dream Garage. What's the one thing you wish people would appreciate more in cars?
God damn me, you ask difficult questions. What I would appreciate is actually people actually driving cars and driving correctly, thinking of what's happening, thinking further than outside the cabin. Drive left. We're not overtaking, drive left. The number of drivers you see coming out of a side street onto a dual carriageway road and just cutting straight across to the fast lane. So that's what I would do, is just think more about your driving and think about your surroundings, not just driving within the cabin.
That's a very good answer. There's one person that I interviewed when I started this podcast series, and one person says, when I asked this particular question, they said how to change a tyre. It's quite embarrassing to think that there's a number of people that when they're out on the roads, they don't know how to change a tyre. It's actually quite scary because everyone relies on, say, the RACV or the NRMA, and they don't even know how to change a tyre properly, let alone there's now cars that don't even have spare tyres. It's rather scary when you think about it.
Well, I mean, the first thing I'd say if someone asked me how to change a tyre, I'd say ring road assist. But I reckon if I was out in the bush somewhere and you had to change a tyre, I don't think that's very difficult. Change a wheel, not change a tyre or change a wheel. That's two different things.
Or change a wheel. Change a
Yeah,
wheel.
change a wheel.
Yeah, change a wheel. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Okay, Tim Schenken. Been very fortunate to have you on the pod, but this is the reason why I got you on. You wake up one morning and you discover that you get a text and it says to check your bank balance. And you think, oh, this is a scam. This must be, one of those scammers that's trying to scam money out of me, and you want to ignore it. But then you get a bit of curiosity and you decide, oh, I'll check the bank balance. And then you do check your bank balance on your app or on your computer, and you suddenly discover you've become an instant billionaire. Someone's dumped a heap of money and you think, this is just a joke or whatever. You then get an email from this mystery benefactor, and it tells you that you can spend any car or any money that you like. You can buy any car, bike, or machine that you want, but you're only allowed 3 in your dream garage. So with that in mind, what is the first car, bike, or machine you would like to have in your dream garage?
250F Maserati.
Oh, that I am very, very fond of. That is a beautiful piece of machinery that anyone that Googles it, just have a look. The proportions on that car is just absolutely incredible. And I'm pretty sure you saw them race when you were growing up as well.
Yes, well, that's probably the reason. Sterling Moss was my hero. And people say, well, why not Jack Brabham? I say, well, Sterling Moss, because I used to buy all the English magazines. And of course, Sterling Moss was the hero, everyone's hero. And so Albert Park, watching at Albert Park, Sterling Moss 250F Maserati, cars going the opposite direction, standing on the golf links there, on Lakeside Drive, behind a post and rail fence. That was the barrier between the spectators and the cars, and watching Sterling Moss sliding that car, beautiful 4-wheel drifts around Lakeside Drive.
Which model? Would you have the 6-cylinder motor or the 12-cylinder, the V12, the 60-degree front-mounted V12 engine?
No, 6-cylinder, I don't remember. Just a 250F? No, it never had it.
I know the T2 model did, the 250F T2, yeah. But I know, the 250F had a 6-cylinder engine.
Yeah, 6-cylinder, 2.5 litres,
Yeah.
I actually drove a replica around Albert Park when they changed the track layout, and they did away with turn 9 along Lakeside Drive, and I did a couple of laps there in the promotion for the Australian Grand Prix Corporation. But anyhow, 250F Maserati is my first choice.
That is an absolutely beautiful piece of machinery. Like, it came originally with a 4-speed, and then in 1956 became a 5-speed. But I've seen images of Sterling Moss, like visual images on TV in the past of Sterling just with that 4-wheel drift. And it's just an absolute beautiful piece of machinery. And of course, it won 2 world titles in its time as well, with in the hands of Manuel Fangio. What was Sterling Moss like as a person? Because he should have won a world title, and he won so many great races throughout his career. Just very unlucky, he never got to win a world title. But what was he like?
Well, I've been very lucky, really. First of all, he was a hero of mine. I've got an autograph book behind me there somewhere with his autograph, which he signed for me at Albert Park in the 56, 55, 56, whatever year it was there. And then I got to know him many years later through the Australian Grand Prix. He was a guest here. I'm a member of the Grand Prix Drivers Club, which is a club of old Grand Prix drivers. He was a member there, and I got to know him and Susie very well. My wife and I, we stayed with him in London. Incredible house and incredible man. He was, what was great about him, he didn't talk about the old days, and it wasn't like that old boy when I was growing up. He really loved motor racing, loved how it was today. he accepted the fact you can't live in the past, and he just had that blend and knowledge as well. He watched all the racing, all Formula One racing. He was a special guy.
Now,
Like a bit like Senna, I guess, and Enzo Ferrari. You're with someone who is special when you're with.
what about the second car that you'd like to have in your dream garage?
Second car probably be a 312 PB.
312 PB. That's a Ferrari 312.
That's the 1972 and 73 Ferrari sports car.
And that's the one that you drove in 1972.
Yes. Well, I'd like it for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's an incredibly valuable car, but they were lovely cars to drive. If you drove something with a Cosworth engine in, they were very lumpy to drive. But the Ferrari, for some reason, was like an electric motor, smooth, silky. You could just cruise around the paddock. I drove one at Silverstone, just through the paddock area many, many years ago. Lovely, easy to drive, very light gearbox, lovely gearbox. Unlike, the gearbox you had in race cars in my time was a Hewland gearbox, which was a great gearbox. But compared to a Ferrari gearbox, it was like a truck gearbox. It was very clunky and heavy. Ferrari was beautiful. So just a beautiful car, flat 12, silky smooth.
And you won 2 races. You won, of course, Buenos Aires and the Nürburgring, the 1,000k races in that Ferrari, which, I can see why there's a lot of memories for you and that association with that car.
Absolutely.
All right, the third car that you like to have in your dream garage.
The third car was very difficult, but for me, because you already prompted me that I'd have to choose 3 cars. Or
We can allow maybe 1 or 2 extra if we really can.
No. I'm happy with 3.
Okay.
But working with a third car, and I decided in the end. Again, it's a Stirling Moss car. Stirling Moss, Dennis Jenkinson, 300 SLR, Mercedes sports car, which they won the Mille Miglia with.
Oh, the with the gull wing as well, isn't it?
No, the Goldwing is the road car. This is the sports racing car.
Okay.
300 SLR. And I was very lucky in 1974, must have been, German Grand Prix at Hockenheim. Mercedes invited the drivers to come to the factory in Stuttgart, Untertürkheim in Stuttgart, and to go through the museum. And after the museum, they took us out. They've got a little test track there within the factory, and so we went out took us in a bus out to the test track, very short drive, and there were the Formula One and sports cars of the 50s, the Moss Fangio cars of the 50s there, and mechanics there in white overalls got out. Would you like to drive one, sir? No question. There was no instructions. Just these cars are priceless. Don't over rev it. Whatever into the cars. So, and I did some laps in both the open car and the Formula One car, but the sports car for me was something special. And then after some months after that day, I was living in England. Post arrives, and there's a little parcel from Mercedes with a photo album in there, and they'd had photographers there taking photos of each of the drivers in the cars, and I've still got that behind me there somewhere. So that was a special day. I don't know if you've read, if you haven't read it, you need to. Dennis Jenkinson wrote that wonderful story on the Mille Miglia, as he was the navigator with Stirling Moss in that race that they won.
That's incredible. That is utterly incredible. Just to look at it now, and it just still looks absolutely beautiful as it was back in the 1950s, particularly in 1955. And as you said, won the Mille Miglia, and of course, it unfortunately was a part of a very tragic period of motorsport, of course, with Le Mans in 1955. But the success that Stirling had with that car at the Mille Miglia, he described it as the greatest sports racing car ever built. really an unbelievable machine. That's his quote. And I can see why you have so much joy having that association with that car, having driven it and got those photos. That's absolutely beautiful. And I just want to explain to our listeners just quickly the technical aspects. It's a 2.98 litre straight 8, not a V8, straight 8 motor with mated up to a 5-speed gearbox. And yeah, the aerodynamics on that car, if you have a look at the photo, it is just utterly amazing. And as you said, they're priceless. There's one of those cars that just stand out all these years on. It's just incredible.
The only thing is that if when I get this email and it turns out not to be a scam,
yeah,
and I have to buy these cars, I need to buy a bigger house. So I've got at least a 3-car garage.
Absolutely. You might need maybe 4 or 5 car, because you need to fit the T-Rock in there somewhere. I love it. That's a really good garage. It's very, very unique, and I'm very impressed. The Maserati 250F, the Ferrari 312 PB, and of course the Mercedes SLR 300 SLR. That is just an utterly incredible dream garage, and I'm very impressed, Tim Schenken. Thank you so much for being so generous in your time, and thank you for what you've done to motorsport. There's a lot of people that I think who have either come across you throughout your career as a driver or as a race administrator, and even as a team owner, that would appreciate the contribution that you've made to the sport. And as someone that's grown up watching the sport and have worked in the sport in the media side of things, I certainly admire the hard work that you've done over the years along those lines of being a race driver, team owner, and now an administrator. So thank you for your contribution to the sport, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been a joy to have you on.
All right, thank you. I see we've gone on a bit, haven't we?
We have a bit, but I've enjoyed it a lot. So thank you so much.
Let's hope we haven't put too many people to sleep.
I don't think so. You're a very interesting man, and I've utterly enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
What an incredible lineup in Tim's Dream Garage, for which he has a real fondness for each of them, and all played an integral part in the history of motor racing around the world. The Maserati 250F delivered 2 Formula One world titles for one Manuel Fangio, and probably could have won more in the hands of Stirling Moss. The Ferrari 312 PB delivered endurance racing success for Tim when he drove for Ferrari, and it remains a highly sought-after car. And the Mercedes 300 SLR, a car Stirling Moss described as the greatest sports car ever built. We wholeheartedly agree with Mr. Moss. It is indeed exceptionally beautiful and definitely one of the greatest. Now, Tim doesn't do social media, but if you want to learn a bit more about Tim's storied career, I strongly recommend listening to his interview with Greg Rust on the Rusty's Garage podcast series. It's a very in-depth chat conducted by one of the best motorsport interviewers in the business. We've put up the links to listen to his episode of Rusty's Garage in the show notes, as well as the Motor Dream podcast website. The address to visit the show website is themotordream.com.au, where you can listen to past episodes, find more information on each of our guests, and also on the show itself. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram with the handle The Motor Dream, and you can start a conversation about your dream garage by using the hashtag The Motor Dream, or drop us a line on what your dream garage would be, or better still, leave us some feedback on the show itself. Our email is themotordream@beastproductions.com.au. Lastly, make sure to like and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, be it Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or YouTube Music. And during the festive season, check out the show library and catch up on all episodes readily available, including this one. And with that, the second season of the Motor Dream podcast comes to an end. It's been quite a journey to bring you all these episodes throughout 2025, and I hope you've enjoyed each and every one of them. It's certainly a challenge to deliver the content every few weeks because, as I've mentioned in a previous episode, I do this off my own back. I don't do it to earn anything from it. I do it because I enjoy it, and I definitely believe there are stories to tell about our passion for all things motoring. A huge thank you to all of my guests that have appeared this year. Your inclusion into this series to date has certainly made it all the more enjoyable. But more importantly, thank you to you for listening. Be it a casual listener or for those who have regularly listened since the very beginning. Your support is greatly appreciated. The show will be back during the first half of 2026 for Season 3, so keep an eye out on our socials for regular updates and some cool clips from past episodes. But for now, thank you for listening, and remember, no matter what time of year it is, please drive or ride safely out on the roads wherever you go. I'm Connor McNally. Have a wonderful Christmas and a safe and prosperous 2026, and I hope you can join me for Season 3 of the Motor Dream Podcast. Catch you then.
Thanks for listening to the Motor Dream Podcast. This series is proudly produced by Beast Productions.